Welcome to our third session today as we explore further in the discussion in employee relations. Last week we looked at the framework of industrial relations in Kenya, and specifically we discussed four key issues. First, we looked at the parties that are involved in the industrial relations in Kenya, and secondly we looked at the aims and objectives of industrial relations in Kenya. We looked at the tripartite approach to industrial relations in Kenya, and finally we looked at the industrial relations charter. This week we want to cover the topic trade union and trade unionism. We therefore will be covering 5 key items. First, we'll look at the definition and the history of trade unionism in Kenya. We'll explore employee relations and trade unions and how they relate. And we'll also look at why employees normally opt to join unions and why, in some other instances, employees may choose not to join the unions. We'll also look at the structure of trade unionism in Kenya. And lastly, we'll look at the contemporary approach to trade unionism in our country, Kenya. Starting with the definition and the history of trade unionism in Kenya, we would say that trade union can be defined as any organization whose membership consists of employees who seek to organize themselves into one entity for the purpose of pursuing their interest, both normally at the workplace and also to regulate the terms and conditions of work generally at the workplace. However, going specifically to the Labor Relations Act 2007, which defines trade unions as an association of employees whose principal purpose, therefore, is to regulate relationship between themselves and the employers within the organization. From this definition, therefore, we want to explore the history of trade unionism in Kenya. Historically, we can say that trade unionism has developed over a long period of time, and the structure or in the formation mirror the development of trade unionism across the world. Looking at it specifically in Kenya, we'll want to explore trade unionism in pre-colonial period, during the colonial era, during the World War exposure. We'll also look at the agitation during independence. We look at trade unionism at the time of independence, and also appreciate trade unionism in pre-colonial era. And lastly, the contemporary period. When we start at the pre-colonial period, we say that trade unionism in pre-colonial period was not there because the structure of work in many jurisdictions actually covered just subsistence kind of work, and therefore there was no need for trade unionism. During the colonial era, when the colonial masters came to Africa together with the missionaries, the activities that they established required that they had people who work for them. And as a result of that, the engagement of employment started. And the nature of work in terms of how employees were exposed was very inhuman, and people decided to form themselves into union to be able to safeguard their interest. And therefore we start seeing a lot of agitation toward trade unionism around the year 1914 to around the year 1919 during the colonial era. The World War, First World War and the Second World War gave a lot of exposure by the slaves who were being taken to work outside the country, and even those who participated in wars. They looked at the way in the developing countries workers agitated, and when they came back, they came with those frontiers in the places of work, and the agitation in terms of trade unionism actually started. We look at this one going on, and actually when you look at the independence of Kenya, trade unionism played a very significant role because they had formed themselves into some groups which formed force that now could push for better working interest. At the time of independence, we see the agitation in terms of the conflicts that were arising between workers and employers. And actually this brought about the introduction of what we have today as the Industrial Relations Charter, which was a social agreement to establish peace and harmony between workers and employers and their relation also with the government. Now, post-colonial era, we have also seen a lot of union agitation all the way to the recent past, where workers will still form themselves into forces and therefore even organize things like the strikes to be able to make better their terms and conditions of work. However, contemporary environment of unions has significantly changed, and we find that we are seeing more and more organized unions that, despite just trying to agitate for employees' rights, also engage in member education to ensure that their members have a better way of engaging with employers. The second item that we want to look at today is the relationship between employee relation and trade unions. And we start by saying that the aim of employee relations in every organization is normally to ensure that they manage successfully employment relationship between the employers and the employee. Employee relations therefore seeks to bring together the workers in the organization and the employers within the organization, and these two sources of powers in a way that they will legitimately relate and observe the rights and obligations of one another for a better working conditions. And they do this through application of the laws, the collective bargaining agreement system, also through performance discussion, ensuring that they also manage environments like rewards, the settlement of disputes and grievances, and also ensuring proper employee involvement environment. Therefore, we can say that for trade unions to succeed in the contemporary business environment, they depend a lot on employee relations. And therefore, to achieve their goals and to achieve their success in managing workers' interest, they require a good employee relations environment and a good environment for their members to be able to work. Employee relations therefore does this through a number of things. First of all, the mechanisms that they use is creating opportunity for consultations, also creating opportunity for involvement of employees in activities that concerns them within the organization, creating better communication channels, also being proactive in managing and dealing with union and issues that arise within the organization. This brings us to a very important question, and we ask ourselves then, why would employees want to join unions? As we look at the historical development, we saw that there was a rough space or dealing between employees and employers. And that actually pointed out a number of reasons why, therefore, employees would want to join union. For example, employees would want to join union to be able to improve their condition of work. They would want to join unions to gain some control over the working environment, which initially was purely under the power of the employers. They also want to join union when they are dissatisfied with management and management is not taking care of their interest. The need for avenue for leadership and also to be able to put pressure on the employer to provide for them better working conditions. And finally, the need for a social outlet. But even despite the fact that we have unions, we've also seen scenarios where employees choose not to join trade unions. And there are a number of reasons. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. For example, union costs employees money because they pay for the services that they are offered by the union. Also, we see that the idea of trade unionism, some employees, especially in the contemporary world, find that it is unnecessary. Why? Because the employee relations that is already created caters for their need within the organization. Employees may also not join the trade unions when they are satisfied with the terms and conditions of work. And finally, Fear of victimization may also make employees not to join unions. We also want to look at the structure of the trade unionism in Kenya. We start by saying first that the internal structure of unions varies greatly from one union to the other. Majority of cases, however, the chief executive of the union is normally the secretary general that is elected by union members. The trade union officers are classified into three main categories. First, we have the full-time employees who are the paid officials of the union. We also have the part-time voluntary officials who are elected to serve at branch level. And then the third category is we have union workers who work at the workplace and they are employees of the respective organizations they work for, who we normally call the shop stewards. All these parties have their duties and responsibilities. For example, the secretary is the CEO of a union. He attends the day-to-day affairs of the union. He is also the chief negotiator of the trade union. The chairman of the union chairs all the union meetings. He ensures union business is properly conducted. He also advises the union and the union committees on the procedures and the plans to be able to run the union effectively, and also make sure that functions of the branches are carried out in an effective way. The shop steward, who is an employee of the respective organization, also have their responsibility. For example, he is the workplace representative. He explains and interpret the CBA to the members. He represent members during grievance meetings within the organization, train shop stewards, use persuasion of the members to be able to engage them in union activities. He also addresses the needs and feelings of the employees, resolve conflicts that arise within the organization, and also he is the mouthpiece in terms of conveying unpleasant or pleasant information when they arise. The contemporary approach to unionism is also a matter that is of interest for us today. We say that despite all these benefits that unions bring towards the organization, world over, we are seeing a significant shift in the way unions work. For example, trade unions throughout the world have realized that it is better when their members are trained. Therefore, they offer training activities for their members. They employ professionals within the unions to be able to guide them in a professional way in dealing with the employers. They also act as a voice through the strategic management and therefore support in strategic decision making. They also have engaged in a lot of capital investment to be able to augment or support the fees that are paid by the members, which is not sufficient to run the unions. Again, we see their play in the industrial environment in general. Finally, we want to answer the question of whether unions are good or bad. Unions are very important for organization, first because they provide support in terms of their members in raising the wages for them, the wages and benefits for their members. They are also important as a check and balance to management within the organization. Also, they help in creating capacity to their members through creating a voice for members within the organization. However, there are negatives, and these negatives, for example, include that unions sometimes end up pushing wages beyond the capacity of the employers. Also, unions sometimes creates a lot of unrest within the organization. Next week, we'll be covering our next topic and appreciating now the impact of unions in the development of the general workplace. Thank you for attending this session and participation. We wish you a nice evening.